You don't know about Bobby Bonilla Day, do you?
Happy Bobby Bonilla Day!
Yay!
Today is the day the Mets paid their oldest player. He is 53 years old, and he doesn't even suit up anymore.
The Mets paid Bobby Bonilla more than $1 million today. Does that make any sense?
July 1st is National Bobby Bonilla Day.
$1,193,248, and don't forget the 20 cents.
And unfortunately for the Mets, they have to write that check 25 times.
That's due to the Mets agreeing 16 years ago to pay him $5.9 million at an 8% annual interest rate.
I got a smile on my face.
That's hindsight. Now, everybody's a genius.
Genius accountant, genius agent.
8%.
Bobby's very happy, and I'm sure he hopes the Mets are happy.
Good things come to those who wait, and I'm going to be very patient. All I want to do is be myself, and I'm going to be ready to play. I'm going to have that smile on my face, and like I said again, it's going to be hard to knock it off. I know you're going to try, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
In December 91, Bonilla signed a 5-year deal worth $29 million.
Enjoy your millions, all right? And good luck in New York.
When he was with the Pirates, he was considered kind of an up-and-coming talent, really good power hitter. He was really one of the best players in baseball.
This New York homeboy is in your face.
When Bonilla got to New York, his RBI slipped, and by mid-season, they had dropped him to the number 5 slot. That was kind of one of the things that fans started getting mad at, that he wasn't performing to their expectations.
You got a problem with that?
The press really was never on Bonilla's side. And they leaked a story that claimed that he had said he didn't like the fans in New York.
Fans getting a little bit impatient with Bonilla.
I think certainly there was bad blood with the fan base because he was symbolic of what had been a very disappointing era.
The last place New York Mets sent Bobby Bonilla, their team leader in 7 offensive categories, to the pennant-contending Baltimore Orioles.
5 clubs in 5 years. That's not a resume, that's a train schedule. Bobby Bonilla is moving again, heading home to the New York Mets. Bonilla makes just under $6 million a year, and he's signed for 2 more years.
I think there were a lot of factors in which the Mets were able to convince themselves that the problems that they had had with Bonilla were a product of a lot of things that were no longer the case.
Everything's always a gamble when you take chances, and hopefully these are the right steps, chances that they're taking, and I'm excited to be back.
At that time, the Mets were kind of on the upswing. Bobby Bonilla was a solid player at that point, pretty good hitter.
Bonilla hits one deep to right field, forget it.
But by mid-season, he clashed with Bobby Valentine. He had been kicked out of the lineup.
Bobby Bonilla sitting, as he has been told he will, for the New York Mets. That creates a problem.
As far as Bobby Bonilla, how long can things exist the way they are right now?
And then kind of the cherry on top, he played cards in the clubhouse as the team was losing in the playoffs. So there was a perception that he was a total net negative for the team, and he kind of had to go. He was becoming a distraction.
No one is going to take on the $5.9 million for the 2000 season for Bobby Bonilla. So there aren't many options for the Mets other than to eat that contract and figure out a way to pay it off.
The Mets came to Bobby first, not Bobby going to the Mets. And that's true of most situations, because the person of interest in the initial stages of negotiation of a deferred contract tends to be the person holding the liquid, holding the asset.
They wanted to use the money so they could sign other players and become more competitive. I remember presenting it to Bonilla in the very beginning because we talked about deferring money.
How about I don't pay you the millions of dollars, the $3 million I owe you now. I'll pay it to you in 15 years. We'll negotiate an interest rate, but I'd like to have that $3 million on hand to do something else with it.
Bobby got it, and he liked the idea of deferring money. He saw it as a win-win.
When you defer money in a contract, you're taking what is the principal, which is how much the player is owed, and you spread it out over a number of years. And you pay an interest rate on that money so that there's a certain present day value of the money. And that's how $5.9 million becomes $29.8 million over 25 years.
Well, the higher the interest rate, the more money the player will receive. You know, part of the negotiation was, what is the interest rate?
Think of a negotiation about interest rate similar to the decision whether to buy a stock. It involves two entities, one convinced to some degree that it's going to go up, and one, perhaps equally, that it's going to go down. Well, the same thing with a negotiation about interest rates.
Bonilla's side wanted 10%, the Mets wanted 6%, and they settled in the middle at 8%.
Bonilla will receive nearly $2 million a year every year from 2011 to 2035. That amounts to nearly $30 million. That for a guy who was being cut because he hit 160, lost his starting job, openly fought with his manager, and during the pennant race refused to pinch hit to help his team.
There'd be no reason to pay the whole thing up front against the background of what we now know about their close ties to Madoff.
Bernie Madoff's $18 billion swindle left victims all over the world. But figuring out what his scheme did to the New York Mets is another matter.
They had among the biggest accounts with Madoff, multiple accounts. The reason why that connection matters is because Bernie Madoff was guaranteeing returns essentially of 10 to 15%.
The Mets believed that paying 8% was reasonable because they knew a way to get more.
Why would you pay Bobby Bonilla $5.9 million right away if, based on how you invested your money, you could make $20 million more? It was free money.
When they were negotiating the deal in 1999, I don't recall a single person saying, "Did you see this deal the Mets just cut with Bonilla?" It was a non-event.
There were deferred contracts for years. It just wasn't publicized.
In 1975, the very first contract in the free agency era was the contract of Catfish Hunter, and that had deferred compensation in it. So they're not as rare as the current talk seems to suggest.
Manny Ramirez, who is famous for leaving checks in his car, agreed to a deferred contract where the Red Sox owe him $31 million through 2027. So Manny's in better shape than Bobby Bo, although I would say that Manny came through more than Bobby Bo did.
There are other players that are being paid out in similar kind of structures that we don't hear about all the time, but certainly Bonilla's is kind of the most glaring because he was just a dreadful disappointment for them.
Over the past couple years, that criticism has kind of gotten louder and louder.
How about a guy who hasn't done anything for a long time on the baseball field?
When the guy's out grilling in the backyard and playing with his grandkids and you're still paying him, doesn't seem like such a great idea anymore.
People talk more in New York, and the outcome of that negotiation seems at first glance to be terribly one-sided.
In 2015, as the Mets made it to the World Series, they made it with Harvey, DeGrom, Syndergaard, and Matz, and all those guys earned less than Bobby Bonilla.
Maybe, if anything, this is a cautionary tale about the practice of seeing into the future decades ahead and trying to kind of say, oh, we'll pay for this later.
What they don't measure is what did the Mets do with the money they saved that they didn't pay to Bobby Bonilla.
If there's a silver lining, it's the fact that when they dumped Bonilla, they freed up the money to sign Mike Hampton.
Mike Hampton turned out to be the MVP of the championship series that year. They went to the World Series. What was that worth to the Mets?
And then after the 2000 season, Mike Hampton ended up going to Colorado, and so the Mets ended up getting the pick from the Rockies that turned into David Wright.
The moral of the story is you can't analyze the quality of the decision 17 years after it was made. It is the prime illustration of hindsight being 20/20.
Bobby Bonilla made about $55 million through the course of his career. He's going to make an additional $30 million up until when he's 65. That's a pretty good deal for Bobby Bo.
I just smile because I'm going to sit back and I'm going to take it day by day and I'm going to have the last laugh.